everyone. I think I have met most of you, but my name's Kevin Skrepnik. I'm the Manager of Community and Emergency Services for the TNRD. So we have a number of folks here tonight. We're all going to speak briefly, but we really wanted to hold as much time as possible for questions and answers. So we'll probably kind of get through our pieces pretty quickly. So we've got folks here from the BC Wildfire Service. So Hugh Murdoch is the incoming incident commander who's looking after the firefighting side of it. We'll have a quick update from our EOC. And then we also have Dale Kronbush, who I think a lot of you have already met already or spoken to at least, who's our recovery manager. And Dale's kind of looking at what supports we can bring in, how we can support people as best as possible as we kind of go forward here. And then, like I said, we're going to kind of be here until we're out of questions. So I'll hand it over to Hugh first.
Yay! Thank you.
That is clearly not directed towards myself, but I will share that to the people who deserve it.
I mean it.
The folks that do know me and hear the words "will be really quick" know that's going to be tricky, and I'm going to prove them right. My name is Hugh Murdoch, and I was here in 2002. I won't go every year since, but in 2002 I came out and did an S100 for folks. And it was a special time. I remember it well because being a much younger version of myself and doing things that I wasn't normally doing, it was nice to come into this valley, and it was a beautiful night, and it was a place that I had not been to, and it's the valley that you remembered on its best days, and it was tough coming in today. But glad to be here with people who cherish the space, and happy to share my information that I have with you on our efforts that are taking place. Give you an update on what we're doing with the fire right now, and hopefully answer questions for what will be taking place in the future. Recognizing that we've been here for less than 48 hours as an incident management team, but we're part of a program that has been here since day one with the fire. My regular day job has me working out of Kamloops. So as a wildfire officer, I do know the area very well. I grew up in Kamloops, and this is, after 2 years of firefighting, I thought I'd try something different, and I didn't. So I'm still here doing it. Anyhow, I appreciate that there's a lot of interest in recovery and not so much in the response efforts that are taking place now. But I hope that you'll find some comfort in knowing that, and I can give you some rough numbers. I could say, there's 151 persons fighting this fire today. That number grew quite a bit today, actually. We brought in 3 more unit crews. These numbers are always fluctuating. Part of the reason for that big bump is that it rained in Princeton, and it rained quite a lot. So the Wildfire Service bumped crews from down there up to give us a most appreciated hand. 24 pieces of heavy equipment working, and Paul helped me out with the aircraft. I think it's about 15 to 20 helicopters working as well. To the fire itself, the areas on the east, which I would suggest might be of most interest to this group, looks very, very good. We are focusing our efforts on the southwest corner and the northwest corner of this fire now, because of the good work that's taken place already on that part of the fire that sort of parallels the Trans-Canada Highway, roughly. We are using drones to scan in the evening to find those smallest of heat sources that are still out in this area. And we welcome that because it gives our crews very purposeful work. But we are looking for those spots that are closest to fire's edge. You will see a lot of smoke and a lot of burning material further into the forests. We are not apt to go in after those to get rid of that smoke. It's just not the best use of our resource, given what's going on in other parts of the province. And in full reality, it's exposure to a hazard that is new to that area. And I guess I would encourage folks here as well to please take that in mind. The forest has inherited a whole lot of new hazards because of this fire. Those hazards are in the form of drought-stricken, dried trees that are now looking for an excuse to fall under the lightest of winds. There are ash pits, and again, this ties into the drought, and trees like Douglas fir and ponderosa with a very robust deep root system. Those roots are often burning out as well, and it just leaves what we would call an ash pit. It's holes, and they're at their very worst when it is truly ash and hot, but even in the months after this time, there will be holes in the ground effectively. So that terrain needs to be observed closely when you're walking in it. It has been changed. Yeah, I think maybe I could just pause there. Kevin, I don't know if you want other folks to speak and then have questions for whomever, or if there's questions specific to the wildfire service that you want me to take now.
Sure. Yeah, I think we'll have a Q&A section at the end, but by all means, if there's things that come to mind now, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sure there's all sorts of things that I haven't spoken to. I like answering questions to the best of my ability because I know that you're at least interested in those matters. So if there are any questions, yeah.
So actively burning, this fire is burning like south, and you're saying on the east side here, like Trans-Canada side, it's basically calm.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if everyone could hear that, but the fire growth that we will experience would be in the northwest and the southwest corners. And I would also like to point out that over the past couple of weeks, there has been almost no growth anywhere on this fire. On the perimeter of the fire, now you might ask, why is there so much smoke? There's still pockets of unburned fuel well within the fire, and that will remain the case. It hasn't burned in its entirety, but there is pockets of unburnt fuel that will be found by fire and torched up on occasion, but they would not add to the footprint of the fire as a whole per se. Excuse me, and we might find opportunities as well to go into the fire and try to tackle some of those spots where there's sizable pockets of green that could still be protected. Did that?
Yeah.
And I guess I would also just like to say too that while there isn't a lot of fire growth, while there is still a lot of smoke in the valley, you know, that handsome fella, and the bald guy too.
My brother, bald guy.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Nickerman construction site screwed us up. So.
But to the amount of smoke, like there are many sources of smoke burning within the perimeter of this fire, and there just really has not been any significant wind to flush out the numerous valleys, and they don't all align nicely anyway, so that it's a real smoke trap out there. And you'll notice that it's not venting up really high, and I guess I would suggest that's in part because the fire that's burning is not really intense, so it's not gaining a lot of momentum and heating a large parcel of air. So it's just drift and close to treetop. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and I guess I was also, like, fire danger within the valley is, like you mentioned, ash pits and trees, but like actual fire danger in close to the valley is not a huge concern right now? Or?
The concern within the valley for fire could be taken just because of the current weather conditions and the drought and the forecast for unsettled, isolated thunderstorms, which means there's a possibility of lightning, and along with that comes wind with higher speeds than normal and changing directions, which none of that is favorable to fire suppression. The good news is that there's 24 helicopters, a couple hundred firefighters looking for a place to happen. So, and for what it's worth, we have been taking on new starts that you won't even hear about because we've gotten on them so quickly. There's a question behind you.
Yeah, you just answered.
Covered?
Thank you.
What would be the physical locations of that southwest and northwest? Like, just to picture it.
Northwest would be between Three Sisters and Blue Earth, and to the southwest, I'm drawing a blank on the bench.
Well, you're sort of into the Ruddock's Dam, Turnip Lake.
Yeah,
Look
it's,
out, look
it's
out,
south
boy.
of Turnip and Onion.
And I do have some public maps that they are on our website, but I brought them along so people can have a look at that.
Arthur Seats is another spot, and I think that's a pretty important spiritual spot for the First Nations as well. That's sort of the southwest part.
Yeah. So there's a question over here.
I've noticed over the past 3-4 days from Ashcroft, looking in this specific direction, there has appeared to be a very large plume of smoke rising 20 to 25,000 feet, I would guess. Is that resulting from the fire, or is it cumulus clouds?
Yeah, not smoke.
It's not
But
smoke.
that's the type of, you'll see that every afternoon with daytime heating, and it's these isolated thunderstorms that could be popping up in various locations. So,
Okay.
yeah, you won't always see it in the exact same spot, but there's certain land features that can help contribute to the making of those. So it's sort of the same area, but it's a weather phenomenon. You're seeing not smoke.
With these two existing fires, is there any scenario where they loop around somehow and get back through the valley?
No, we're pretty comfortable with that. When you say the valley, you mean the Venables Valley?
Yeah.
You're in a very good spot now.
Not then, but
Now.
You're in the black.
Come back.
At least there's that much. Less worried.
Not seeing any other questions, Kev.
Okay. Do you want to do the?
Sure.
Yep.
Again, thank you folks for hosting this and just for being the understanding, compassionate folk yards. Appreciated by ourselves and by the crews as well. Thank you.
Sorry, is there a reason why there's security today down below, but there hasn't been for the past week?
Yeah,
Your
it's,
turn?
it's, we wouldn't use the word security either in their descriptor of their job description, but yeah, it's an opportunity for folks down there to be sharing some written information and just tracking the amount of traffic that could be interested in the area, and it's taking place in a few different locations. Yeah, I would not read into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question about the trees. What we will have to do for the trees? That's it's scary when you go on the road and the back one, okay, it's fully burned, stick everywhere. So should never be using anymore, or it's you go in there and it's like a wall. You almost say
Yeah, I would. My opinion of this would be that the weather will help identify the most vulnerable trees with wind and snowpress. The trees are not going to get more stable, and for roadways that are traveled frequently, I do think it would be, to use a term that I don't really like, but sanitize a road would be to take down trees that are within striking distance of a road that is frequently traveled, especially if it's a road that would be required for, egress routes when there aren't many available in a valley such as this.
I have a question kind of off that. When your crew, I don't know how to refer to them, but they made a fire break behind our homes down here, and it comes off a corner or a junction at the end of this road. It's kind of a junction. So those trees that are lying on there, we're starting to kind of clean that area up behind our homes. But as we're doing it, or as I'm doing it, I don't know about the others, but as I'm doing it, I'm noticing a lot of dry needles. And it wouldn't take much to get those started. So I'm cutting the branches off and removing the needles and piling things up. But what I'm most concerned about is that long stretch from that corner, that junction at the end of this road here, and up to behind our places. So that's Crown land, and we've been told that we can't even cut up that wood because we have to get permission from the Crown, and that there was some talk between different departments that that was being looked into, but we'd like to get that removed, and whether someone from the government comes in or you give permission for us to come in and use it for winter or whatever the case may be, it would be nice to get it removed.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a quick stab at this. What you're speaking to is what we would call rehabilitation.
Okay.
And it's rehabilitation of machine guards, sometimes hand guards made by ground crews if it's on slopes that are quite vulnerable to erosion. And that's work that is coordinated by people within government, within the forest district offices. People that aren't tied to fire suppression specifically, but it's people that could be the engineers that build roads, people that market timber for the value back into, like, if it's still a way to salvage that timber. So efforts would be made, but the efforts will be focused first and foremost on the most vulnerable locations to erosion and slope stability and that sort of thing.
Well, I'm thinking of lightning and things like this, and if it hits that end, it's just got all this fuel. The wind generally comes from the south at this time of year. So if it catches on fire anywhere down there, it's just going to come, I mean, it's all this line of fuel. And we're extremely grateful. I know that our house was saved because they built that road, or they created that fire break in there. I mean, it wasn't probably no more than 30 minutes, our house would have been up, for sure. So we're like so grateful. But now we just want to take that next step to kind of clear.
Yeah, and I appreciate too that that's made a difference. What's also worth pointing out is that we haven't imported fuel or timber. We haven't made more material available to burn than what was here in the past. We may have changed the arrangement of it somewhat, but that wick of fuel has always been there.
Well, it's all laying down stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's, I guess, what I would call the arrangement has changed some.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why there'll be rehab efforts taking place. It will not take place in the next few weeks. And you will have that at your back door through the remainder of the fire season.
Okay.
Thank you again.
I don't know, my question is who to ask to, but I will ask it. Maybe it's another. I took the road, the south road, to go to Kamloops and to come back, and I saw there is orange ribbons and there is some erosion of the road. From one side of the road, it's like the mountains, you can go there with the car, and the other side is very cliff.
Smart.
And I saw you put orange ribbons there because the road starting to collapse. I have a huge van, and I'm very worried. There's a place where we turn, and it's very narrow. You cannot, and if I would at that place where it start to I don't understand what you say. It's just, is the road gonna take care of, or because I saw you put orange ribbons there, and
So the ribbons that were put there, and I'm not familiar with them, we might take that road on our way out. It may have been identified by BC Wildfire people as a hazard.
It was, I saw it on the day they were marking.
Okay. It's a hazard that we would probably ask road maintenance companies to correct.
is it taken care of, or?
Well, if the flagging's still there, I'm going to say no, but we can look into it for you.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's good to get on early, right? Because it's an erosion problem, and it won't get better on its own.
I just have a color coding question. I've been seeing various markers around the valley, different tags. What are those things?
That's super secret.
But
No, my sister's a librarian. I'll answer your question. We use different colors of ribbon, and then we do write on some of them as well. And it has to do with our danger tree assessing program, and to whether or not an area has been assessed and when it's been assessed and to what level. And we'd have different flagging used at a start of a section and at an end. And then we have flagging, we have very specific flagging for very specific purposes. Some of it's just generic and says fire control, and some of it's no work zones or danger trees, and then combinations of different colors mean different things.
what does blue mean?
That's cold. I might look to Chad for the blue.
So pretty much we shouldn't touch that.
Structure protection.
Assessing hazards.
So assessment of properties and structures, so I can drive by and say, okay, green, yellow, red, blue.
I know it goes without saying, but we shouldn't touch it.
Bladder.
Yeah, please do not take the ribbon away. And at some point, it'll be abundantly obvious you can take it away.
In the winter, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you very much.
Thanks, you. Evening, everyone. My name's Mike Knopf. I'm the emergency program
You have to
coordinator.
hold that like right like
Oh,
this.
sorry.
On
You're
me.
very loud though.
Perfect.
Yeah, my wife has never told me to speak up.
There's a lot of
Never heard that before. So I'm the emergency program coordinator with Thompson-Nicola Regional District. So Kevin asked me to give a bit of an update on our Emergency Operations Centre. So the acronym you'll hear is EOC. If I throw some acronyms at you, just throw a book at me, I'll fix it. I've actually sent a whole sentence once where the only real words were is, and the. So I'll try to use real words. So we've been activated here since the beginning of the fire. Really right now focusing really on being ready for the next one, because we are in the middle of August and we expect fire season is not over yet. You know, thankfully with the turn in the weather, it may not be as bad as we were hoping this fire season, but we are still in a state of readiness for the next one. That's every day I wake up, we're ready for the next one. Recovery is a really big focus for us now. So we've engaged Dale as our recovery manager to, you know, help with some of the problem sets that we're encountering through recovery. The Emergency Operations Centre really focused on, during the response phase, getting out alerts and orders, trying to keep the public informed. ESS is one of the things that we look after from the Emergency Operations Centre. So I'm sure everybody here is familiar with ESS at this point. It's a volunteer-run program. So everyone you interacted with during ESS is a volunteer. And they either, you know, there are a lot of retirees, people put down their day jobs to provide that service. So can't say enough good things about the folks who run our ESS for us. They're really true champions in emergency response. So looking after the people is really our primary focus at the Emergency Operations Centre. So we're there to ensure communications happen, the alerts go out, and then we work with all the other partner agencies to try to figure out where the problems are and what we can engage to support. BC Wildfire, great partner. MOTI engaged. So when the road, Venables Road, if there's a big erosion pit there, well, we can talk to Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. That's their road. So they're tasked with fixing that. So that's something I'll bring away from this meeting and talk to the area road manager about that hazard.
the blocks are also gone on one corner.
And
they're gone.
a lot of traffic on that road, so there will certainly be some road issues there, and that is on MOTI's radar to, you know, look at their road. And
So
that's
not Dawson, but.
well, it's the ministry who's in charge. They'll get Dawson to do the work.
Okay.
But I'll interface with the ministry to make sure that this is on their radar. So lots of problem sets come into the Emergency Operations Centre, and you know, if we can get one of our partner agencies to fulfill that, that's great. If not, then, you know, we look somewhere else. Use a lot of volunteer organizations. So we did set up a pet shelter this year. Not a pet head in a bed there, but that's okay. We really operate in a manner of, I'd rather explain to someone why we did something as opposed to why we didn't do something. So, you know, that shelter was set up through a volunteer group, the Canadian Disaster Animal Rescue Team has volunteers, they engage. So they're one of our regular partners in emergency management. And the list is really long. Depends what the problem is, depends who we want to engage. Security for the valley while everyone was evacuated. That fell to the TNRD. Now that we've transitioned into recovery and re-entry, those folks you saw down at the north entrance, I believe they're guardians for Cook's Ferry, and they're working with BC Wildfire to help with the area restriction that's in place. So there's a fairly large area restriction in place now. So once that got into place, we stood down our security and transitioned over. So it's really, emergency management is a team sport, and we need to work really closely with all of our partners. And happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Something like the road, for instance, like, does it help in any way if we try to do, like, we contact people, or is it better that you contact them, or, like, I'm just wondering.
There is public-facing numbers for road issues.
Because
right?
There is, because I'm just thinking you have more to do than just our valley, whereas we're driving by it every day. So does it help if we put pressure, essentially? Yeah.
Well, did you have a comment?
Yeah, to add to your question, the answer is that, and it's kind of an expectation we have even though in the forest tribe, I'm the wildfire officer out a little bit anyway. So what you could think about to assist as they're going through the transition of recovery and repair is when we have rain events, and you know what happens with the last few years of the rain events that are occurring. They're quite sudden, fast, heavy things. If you know of an area where you have some culverts you've been seeing or whatever, maybe take a drive out there, and if it's safe, help clear them so they don't build up and come across the road. So there's probably a little bit of recovery work that you can assist while we and the agencies move through to make that recovery, because it's going to have an impact, and we know what's happened after a number of fires with the rain and what comes off. So we got to do it as a team. So it's important.
Yeah, good point. But the public reporting number, if you see a hazard on Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure Road, report it in. They can't fix it if they don't know it's there, and they cover an awful lot of roadways.
Yeah.
But happy to take those issues when they're a real public safety issue. Happy to take those issues forward. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, but I'm not sure. I have an idea, but I'm not sure everybody will love me with that idea. I was thinking maybe if it could be one way, it will be less hazard to drive those two entrances. But I really.
Well, that's widening the road.
Yeah, and I was widening the road. I mean, there's lots of issues there. It's Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's road. So, that falls within their purview to manage their roadways.
Instead of a two-way.
Yep.
As far as regulations go for the land, because it's changed so much, for instance, in the cattle department, free-range land, is there any restrictions to how that's used now as opposed to how it was before?
Not being the land manager, I mean, my involvement with cattle throughout this event has been to get them room and board. So, we've supported an awful lot of cattle that have had to come off the range. And so this is going to fall to the Ministry of Forests. Range tenure is going to be a real problem because a lot of that grass that cattle was eating is no longer available to them. For now. Yeah. And in the case of the Elephant Hill fire, it was at least 3 years before some of that tenure came back into production. So you've got to give that grass a chance to reestablish itself. If it starts getting, grazed before it has an opportunity to reestablish itself, you're fighting against yourself. So, but that falls to the Ministry of Forests, and certainly talking to some of the producers, and we have a liaison in our Emergency Operations Centre specifically for the agriculture industry. Range tenure is an issue that's already been raised. So, and along with that comes fencing. Right? A lot of fence lines were burned down, and cattlemen working with the Ministry of Forests, they can, fix a lot of that range tenure fencing. Other fencing is a bit more of a problem.
So that I think that's sort of a question because, there are agricultural pursuits here for our own animals and, it falls to us to fence our own properties to keep them off, the range cattle. But now our fencing has been burned. So, are there any sort of, maybe this isn't for you, but are there any sort of recovery programs to help those of us who are not ranching, but who are trying to manage our own agricultural pursuits and not have the ranch cows interfere with that?
Right. And complicated question. I'm going to throw that over to Dale as a recovery issue. But because yes, the range tenure, the range fencing will come back, not quickly. That's a big job. So the cattlemen working with the producers and the Ministry of Forests will look after that. Private fencing is a whole nother problem.
Yeah, and that's been our problem because we can't do any agricultural pursuits without fencing to keep the range cows out.
Right.
So basically, we've just been crippled agriculturally. And if there's no sort of, the responsibility is all on us, that's a little bit problematic, I would say. That there wouldn't be any sort of assistance for that. It's just saying, okay, forget your agriculture pursuits. It doesn't count. And that's frankly frustrating, right? Because there's been a long history of, people funding this fencing to try and manage our own agriculture pursuits and poof.
Right, yeah.
Well, still falls on us. Still falls on us to figure it out.
Yes, it would be nice if there was some sort of assistance that was, also offered in that end instead of only that end.
Where are we at?
For fencing, that's usually got to go through the Ministry of Agriculture. The real bonus is that you folks are in a certified farm. You've got an identified farm. You've got 1,700 acres of farm, and I would at least hope that if there was any assistance out there, that they'd assist to get at least the outside of it all covered up with a fence of some sort.
The Ministry of Agriculture traditionally runs a program called Agri Recovery, but it's a program that runs as and when. There's no permanent program for agri recovery. Every time we go through fire season, it looks a little different. So we don't know if or what agri recovery will look like this year.
But that's something that we should be looking into.
And stay tuned through, once we hear about it, we'll get it out on our social media feeds and, we'll propagate that message as best we can. And I've already been pushing the Ministry of Agriculture about, is there agri recovery?
So it's something that usually happens at the end of the fire season? Yeah.
Generally. They have to figure out what the whole scope and scale of the problem is everywhere, right? Yeah.
It's kind of a question, Mike, is that we have continual emergency management community resilient meetings, pre-ox. Is there further ones that would be planned for the folks out here as well, like for recovery conversations and issues that are occurred after? We know we have them during the fire season on that part, but are there more recovery conversations that occur to bring up these issues that we're talking about right now?
Well, and the Ministry of Forests, well, actually, I'm not sure who leads it, but there's generally a land-based recovery working group. Certainly with Cooks Ferry and Oregon Jack Creek being impacted as they have, that group will likely stand up and the TNRD will be part of it. I'm not sure what it will actually do. There is one currently working for the East Bush Creek fire out in the Shuswap last year. And, you know, land stability there is really the biggest issue, and, you know, erosion into creeks, things like that, some of the monitoring that's going on.
And what's the name of that group again?
It'll be a land-based recovery group.
And just to be clear, that's for everything that happens on Crown land, but if you're speaking to things that are on private property, that's within the realm of TNRD working alongside Emergency Management BC. So it depends like what part of the land base you're speaking of, but definitely if it's on the Crown land, then there is a group there that TNRD will be a part of. But if you're speaking to private property, it's a different kind of recovery model there. And I do know, like, through your efforts that you've been engaged with the community, so I'm sure you're going to continue to have meetings with your community liaisons and your recovery manager to see what those potential opportunities are for recovery and stay connected even after this, obviously.
Yeah, recovery is not quick. So it can be a fairly extended process. Some of the problems are, I mean, they just take time to solve. So, you know, certainly we'll be engaged in recovery conversations. I'm still getting phone calls about the East Bush Creek fire. I'm still getting phone calls about the atmospheric river in 2021. So, you know, the problems don't all get solved, and sometimes it takes a long time. So patience is key.
I'm not sure if it's for you or Dale, but for the people who lost their permanent residences, do they, for now, forever, till they have a place to live, get supported by ESS? Like, how does that work?
Well, and certainly Dale can talk about that, and, you know, it's one of his speaking points for sure, but no, they don't. Right? There is an end state to ESS. My conversations with the province, anything more than 3 months is probably not achievable. So, you know, that's sort of the outside of the supports they're prepared to provide. Currently, folks
3 months from evacuation or from
3 months of ESS.
3 months period, right.
So right now it's 2 weeks. I think people are being, who have been lost their homes. It's if you're getting the e-transfers, they only do that for a week at a time, but I think they've extended people for 2-week intervals. And, you know, ultimately the goal is to get people into some form of recovery as soon as possible, right? And Dale will talk about that. I mean, recovery.
But be patient.
Well, I mean, short, medium, and long-term goals, right? So that's what you need to bend your head around and your thinking is, okay, recovery really has 3 phases, and, you know, you're not going to achieve your long-term goals immediately. You know, especially if you're looking at reconstruction. That doesn't happen quick. So, yeah, there is an end state, and, you know, our goal is to get everybody there sooner.
Can I ask a question about that recovery trajectory?
Sure.
So we're just speaking in forestry terms, maybe it's a 500-year trajectory or hundreds of years trajectory we're looking at here for recovery, and we seem to be good at emergency response at the 11th hour, but now that we're recovering from the fire and maybe there's possibility of water instability, correct me if I'm wrong, but we experienced what was called a hot fire. We didn't experience a cold fire. This hot fire scarified the earth. We've lost our mycelium. We've lost everything that holds moisture in the soil. It's been pasteurized, and now we have to recover, hopefully before another emergency. Who's the moisture retention expert to help us in the immediate 5, 10, 100-year plan for stabilizing everything above us and helping maintain moisture here for future, so the next fire that comes, we can welcome a cold fire. what's the model there?
Well, I don't think there actually is one going on into that extended time frame. So the land-based recovery working group, so that's going to be a piece of that. They're going to be, so someone had mentioned the post-wildfire hazard assessment. So that's the first step, and that's going to be the Ministry of Forests coming out with their geo people to look at the hillsides and the soils and their susceptibility to erosion and what we can expect if we get a big rainstorm. Are we going to have slides or what that looks like? So there'll be an immediate assessment that we'll get initial copy at the TNRD that'll identify any imminent threats to public safety. So, if you see me in 6 months knocking on your door with a report, it's probably because somebody has said that there's a gully above you that, could be a hazard. Once they have that report, they tender that out into the private sector and get a bunch more, PDOTs to, go out and do a bunch of science on that document. And that's a fairly comprehensive document that looks at slope stability and dangers to public safety and other issues in watersheds. So that's going to be a piece of it. I can't really speak for what the land-based recovery working group's going to look like, but in the I'm gapping on the Knutsford fire's name. Rossmore, thank you. In the Rossmore fire, I think part of that was some reseeding of some of the rangeland. The Ministry of Forests is looking at salvage logging. Some of those things are all part of that land-based recovery. If need be. And again, this falls outside of my level of expertise. But if you drive to Scotch Creek, I don't know if you're familiar with that area at all, but it used to be a huge forest on your left as you were driving towards Scotch Creek. It's gone. So it burnt significantly, and Shetland harvest logged almost everything else. So what their plan for that is in the future, I don't know, but that's part of their recovery process.
Okay, sorry, so just to, if I understood you correctly, it's the Ministry of Forests Land-Based Recovery Group, they're geo people, they're going to be the next eyes on the ground here to help us in our trajectory for recovery.
Yeah, and I would expect, I can't really speak for the ministry, but in the past, the time frame has generally been like, I would expect we would probably see the initial report late September, early October. Would be a reason
I pushed them, a couple days into the fire. I'm saying, okay, what does the timeline for the post-wildfire look like? And I expect, we get rain in the fall, so I expect to see a report before fall.
Mike, maybe I'll jump in quickly too.
Yeah.
Like, we already have rehabilitation experts working with us within our incident. We've already taken steps with equipment to clear some most significantly blocked gullies and drainages. They have to start at the most critical locations. It is time sensitive, and I'd love to tell you that the government will be everywhere, always, wherever it's needed, but we're not beating, and like, you can laugh, but climate change is beating us. And that's what we're up against, and a time frame that works on a very different scale than what humans are used to. So it's things get built up and things get brought down.
Okay, so one last question. We're engaging with logging companies and people in machinery who are going to help us hopefully rehabilitate and thin what we have left and thin what is still a fire fuel load. Before we get a contract in place and as we want to get as comprehensive as possible, are we allowed contact with this land-based recovery group to possibly dovetail with our efforts?
I would see that on Crown land, our efforts will be guided by that recovery group. And then I'm curious to know who you'd be working with in the logging industry to partner up with.
Well, on our private land?
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested in smaller scale European style machines that are going to work on the contour, not go screaming up and down and create more erosion problems and clear cut. So, you know, I have a personal